But I do want to announce that we've got another event coming up. So if you're having fun at this one, how many of y'all went to the bowling event last year at Brooklyn Bowl? Y'all have a good time? Well, we're doing the same thing at Kings Bowl this year, and obviously we did that one for charity. And there's a lot of great causes here in Middle Tennessee, a lot of really, really important things that people are doing in the community to uplift so many others who can't do it themselves or don't have the means to. And I'd like to welcome a couple of people to the stage who are doing just that, and that's who we're going to benefit with the Split Happens Part 2, the second annual Bowling Bash. So I'd like to welcome Stephen Young and Andy to the stage of Home Street Home. A round of applause for them, please. Thank you guys so much. It's Stephen's birthday, as a matter of fact. I don't know. Stephen, how uncomfortable are you with the group singing happy birthday? Is that too cringy?
If they sing like me, it's going to be cringy.
Okay.
So, you know.
Maybe we just give him a happy birthday on 3, right? 1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, buddy. Here you go.
Thank you.
So these lovely folks run an incredible organization called Home Street Home, and they do so much for the unhoused community here in Middle Tennessee. And that's who we're going to benefit with the Split Happens bowling event this year. And I just wanted to have you guys up to talk about the work that you're doing for people who might not be familiar and kind of understand why it is so important to help those who can't help themselves at this point.
Well, first, thanks for having us. You and I go back a few years now.
A little bit.
And
since the tornado, bud.
And I go back with the station as far as a listener back to the George Plaster days. So that's telling my age, ain't it?
How many of y'all are OGs like that? Like the original 104.5 crew? Absolutely.
And but at 52 years of age, something happened that I never in a million years thought could happen. I found myself homeless on the streets of Nashville. And didn't think it would last very long. Well, that wasn't going to last very long, turned into 5 years. And when I was fortunate enough to get off the streets, I couldn't forget what I learned out there. Because like a lot of people, I thought I knew what homelessness was all about. And like a lot of people, I had no clue. So it was an education by fire, so to speak. But when I got off, I knew I needed to do something. I didn't know what. I got off the streets in March of 2014, and in October of 2014, I borrowed $600 from a good friend of mine. Matter of fact, the man that got me off the streets. And I started Home Street Home Ministries out of the trunk of my car, not knowing anything about running a nonprofit. And we're now the largest in Nashville doing what we're doing, and this October we'll be doing it for 10 years. And I'm very, very proud of that. But we're different from any other organization because we're a boots on the ground, in the field operation. I learned a couple of things when I was homeless. I learned what was being done, but more importantly, I learned what wasn't being done. And so we zero in on what wasn't being done. I like to say we make house calls. We go to where they are. We don't expect them to come to us. And to give you a little example, we average delivering about 12 tons of food a year to the homeless community here in Nashville. And another thing that I'm proud of, I got one of the best outreach teams in the business, not only in Nashville, but across the country. But like myself, they don't get a paycheck. None of us get a paycheck. We are all strictly volunteers. So 93 cents of every dollar that's given to Home Street Home is spent on the homeless community here in Nashville. And I'm extremely proud of that.
Well, and we're extremely proud to know Stephen and to know Miss Andy and to be, trying to help in as many ways as we can. So we're very excited to have them out at Kings Bowl in Franklin to raise some money for a great cause. In fact, there's a QR code on the screens around you. If you guys want to go ahead and get tickets now, those proceeds will go to Home Street Home. And we're very excited to have you guys be a part of it. And thank you guys so much for coming out.
Thanks for having us, and thank you for being here tonight. And love this guy, and love everybody at the station. And can I say something special about this little 5 foot tall She swears she's
Absolutely.
5'2". Okay?
I got you at 5'2".
You know.
I got you.
But this woman I married the first time now 44 years ago, 45 years ago. It lasted a year. She was 19 and I was 23 when we got married. 5 years ago today, I'm sitting on my computer on Facebook thanking everybody for their birthday wishes. The messenger window pops up and it's her. We hadn't seen or talked to each other in 40 years. And this October, we'll celebrate our 5th anniversary the second time around. She is the reason I am who I am, and I'm able to do what I do because she supports me and the ministry 100%. And I may be biased, but she's the most incredible woman in the world, and I am so lucky. And I just wanted to tell her that why I had her here. Thank you, buddy.
No, thank you guys. Happy birthday, brother.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out. Miss Andy, thank you so much. All right, how many of y'all crying? I'm a little dusty up here. We should probably break down some more tape before I get all emotional, shall we? So let's get back into it whenever Greg's ready to come back up to the stage, and we'll break down some of these rookies that we've got. So on the whole, in terms of how you guys are feeling about the rookie class, like now that you've had time to let the dust settle, I know there was some initial emotions, but for the most part, vibes back where you think they need to be, or how are we feeling about these rookies? Yeah, that's about what I thought. That's about what I thought. But they've got a couple of interesting players, Greg, in this rookie class, and in particular, the next player that we're going to talk about in Tajae Spears, the running back from Tulane. Will Levis in the second round. They trade up to get him. We've talked about the wide receiver situation, and they opt for running back out of Tulane in the third. A hugely productive college football player this last season, and somebody who I know that you've enjoyed watching.
Yeah, I watched Tyjae Spears very early in the process this year, probably right around the Super Bowl, maybe right when I came back from the Super Bowl, because he had that unbelievable game in the bowl game against USC where Tulane beat USC.
Cotton Bowl.
Was that the Cotton Bowl?
Mm-hmm.
I forget all the names of the bowl games, Buck. You know, there's so many of them.
Greg, how on earth can you remember who Will Levis threw the interception to in the red zone against Georgia, but you can't remember the name of the Cotton Bowl?
Sorry, you know. And I got to tell you, I really like Tyjae Spears' tape a lot. You know, he's a little different back than what the Titans now have, and I'm very curious to see. And again, no one knows this. You know, Brand Carthen knows this. Mike Vrabel might know it, but I'm curious to see if we're going to see a bit of a transition over time here, because Tajae Spears, he's not a foundation back in the sense that, like Derrick Henry, you'd give the ball 20, 25 times a game. He's more of a primary type back, and there's a difference there. A primary back any given week could carry maybe 20 times, but that's not the way you're structuring your offense. You're not going into a game saying, we need to give a Tajae Spears the ball 20 times a game. Maybe the game plays out that way, and it happens. Maybe the game plays out, and he gets 12 carries. But he's a really good runner. He's shifty. He's elusive. He finishes runs. He can run inside. He has enough speed to outflank the defense when he bounces to the perimeter. And the thing that really stands out about his game is he is a terrific receiver, both out of the backfield and you can detach him from the formation. That's not something we've seen a lot with the Titans over the last number of years, with backs who can detach from the formation. And that's become a really important piece of NFL offenses because it gives you a lot more versatility with what you can do in the pass game. And the other thing it does is it gives the quarterback more information before the snap of the ball. What really good offenses try to do with their formations and their use of personnel is give the quarterback as much pre-snap information as possible based on their film study of how the defense is going to respond with their alignment before the ball's snapped. You know, it's one reason why tight ends have become so important in this game. Think of the Chiefs. Now, obviously, Travis Kelce is the best tight end in the game, and he'll be a first-ballot Hall of Famer. But Travis Kelce lines up as the single receiver to the short side of the field a lot, where there's three receivers to the wide side of the field, but he's the single receiver to the short side of the field, what we call the boundary X. And that dictates how the defense will respond. So Patrick Mahomes comes to the line of scrimmage and sees how the defense responds. Who is lining up over Kelsey? Who's lining up over the inside receiver to the 3-receiver side? This gives him a lot of pre-snap information, and that's critical for a quarterback. So when you have a back who can split out, that really helps a quarterback. So Tajae Spears, to me, is a very complete back. He's not big. He's probably 205 pounds. You'd love for him to be 215, but he's not. But he is a really good player with a lot of pretty high-level traits. I'd be really curious, Buck, to see, assuming health, how he's deployed by the Titans this year.
Well, and that's the question that I think a lot of you guys had about Dontrell Hilliard, who was in this offense, who was obviously well-equipped to run routes within the concepts that they were
and Spears
asking.
is a better player.
Right. So I guess, is that the role, and we talk about the deployment, is he capable of executing that role based on the kind of nuances that we saw from Dontrell Hilliard in his ability to run routes, in his ability to understand spacing and landmarks?
Yeah, and I think that the offshoot to that question is the Derrick Henry factor. Do they still want this offense to look like that, where Henry is going to carry 25, 28 times a game in an ideal world? Or are they going to look to sort of expand the offense and maybe Henry, carries 15 or 16 times a game and they become more expansive in their use of personnel and formations and even play calling? And we don't necessarily know the answer to that now. Look, you can win a lot of ways in this league. If you want to reduce the way coaches think to the Cliff Notes version, as it were, offenses are trying to create explosive plays and defenses are trying to stop explosive plays. That's really, as I said, if you're reducing it to its simplest terms. So how do you create explosive plays on offense? You want to be able to do that in more than one way. You don't just want to be able to do that off a play-action pass game. You want to be able to do it in multiple ways with the use of personnel, the use of different formations, lining up people in different spots, what we call receiver location. You want to be able to do that. You don't want everything to just have to work off the play-action pass game, which is a very viable way to create explosive plays, but you don't want it to be the only way. So really, Buck, the larger question is, how do they see themselves going forward?
Right. It's a philosophical
It's
thing.
a philosophical question. There's many different ways to do things in the league, and there's many different ways to be successful. Much depends on your personnel, obviously, but much also can depend on the philosophy of a coach.
And Mike Vrabel's philosophy is outrush the opponent, have a better QBR than the opponent, win the turnover battle. Those are the three fundamental things that these players get preached to them before every team meeting, regardless of opponent.
So say those three again.
Outrushing the opponent, having a better QBR than the opposing quarterback, and winning the turnover battle.
And again, then it's a philosophy. I would bet that other coaches would say, and I'm not taking sides here, but because like I said, you can win many ways. I would bet that other coaches might say that our philosophy is we want to create more explosive plays than the other team.
I think that they could do well with some more explosive plays than the other team from time to time, and certainly with the rate that this offense has not been able to score.
Right. So
as
I mean,
of late.
How
is the question.
Well, that's what I was just trying to get into, young man. Is how you there's multiple ways to do that beyond just, let's say, play action off Derrick Henry, which, by the way, for a couple of years we know they did that extremely well. Was it 2019 that they were in the AFC Championship game? I mean, obviously they scored 30-plus points a game that year.
That's quite a run, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's multiple ways to do it, and there's no right or wrong. It comes down to philosophy and your personnel. And, all I would say is this. You want to have multiple ways to be able to do the things you want to do. You don't want to be able just to be able to accomplish what you want to do one way.
And I guess that my question about Spears would be, is that a sign that they are, the drafting of him, and we don't know what Derrick Henry's future is one way or the other, but I heard your appearance I heard your appearance on 3HL on Thursday, Brent, I believe.
Thursday.
Thursday. You can check out the 3HL podcast wherever you get your podcast.
Nice of you to listen.
Listen, I wanted to make sure I wasn't asking you a redundant question. No. But you mentioned that
we have Slay for that.
Slay's drinking room temperature vodka somewhere around here. It's been quiet for too long. Somebody check on him. There he is. But with the drafting of Spears and Derrick Henry in an expiring contract situation, is that kind of a player a sign that they might be willing to evolve the way that they've been playing football on the offensive side, given that Derrick is such a singular kind of player versus what they've just added in Spears?
Without obviously having a the bat phone to the head coach, we can fake. You think he'd pick up if I FaceTime him right now? You might throw something. I would answer that in the affirmative. I wouldn't be surprised if this was Derrick Henry's last year in Tennessee, and it wouldn't surprise me if they kind of would move toward the idea that the back needs to be a little more versatile in what he can bring to the table.
So that idea is something that runs up against a lot of people. The idea that this is probably Derrick Henry's last season in Tennessee. A lot of people don't. But I think that, limitation is the wrong word when you're talking about Derrick. But he's such an obvious thing when he's out there on the field.
You're right. Limitation's the wrong word, but you would say it this way. And obviously, he has been a phenomenal. That's not the debate here.
Right.
The debate is not whether Derrick Henry's a good player. That's not the point. But he's a certain kind of player. He almost demands that you play offense a certain way. And then again, you get into that philosophical argument. Do you want to only be able to play offense a certain way, or do you want to, in a sense, be able any given week to play multiple ways depending on who your opponent is and how you feel the best way to attack that specific opponent is? He is a certain kind of player, phenomenal at what he is, but specific.
Specific is a better word. You're right. Let's take a look at some Tajae Spears plays because he was, as we mentioned, an incredibly productive player last year at Tulane. And you brought up the Cotton Bowl, Greg, so I think we can start with the USC
Against
game.
USC.
There's a 47-yard play here in the third quarter, 14:55 on the clock. You see him taking the ball there in space. Obviously, he can make moves.
Yeah, now he ran. Obviously here he runs through a hole, but, he's... and this was basically a zone play, what we call split flow zone with the tight end crossing the formation. He ran a lot of zone. He also ran what we call gap scheme, where you pull a guard or a tackle across the formation. That's a man scheme. This is another zone scheme here. Was this the same play?
Yeah, same play.
Yeah. And so he has a lot of experience running both zone concepts and what we call gap scheme, which, as I said, is a man concept in terms of blocking. He's really good in space. He's elusive. He made defenders miss at the second and third level quite a bit. And that's what you want to be able to do if you're a back. Obviously things can be blocked really well at the first level and at times at the second level, but you want to be able to make defenders miss at the second level of the defense and certainly at the third level of the defense. That's how big runs. How many times with Derrick Henry did we see him get to a safety, and obviously safeties didn't really want to tackle him?
There have been many times that I felt bad for Jordan Poyer. I have seen Jordan Poyer I don't know why Jordan Poyer sticks out in my mind, the Bills safety, but I've seen him take a couple of those hits. Try his damnedest to take that head on.
He's a very hard guy to tackle. Spears obviously beats guys differently than Derrick Henry would.
So in terms of how Spears beats the defense, or how they put Spears in positions to succeed, and we'll show some more plays here in just a second. But the suddenness, I think, when I watch him, is something that stands out.
Yeah, no question. He's sudden. He's got some explosiveness to him. He can certainly get to the edge as well. He's just a really good back, and it's the receiving element that I think that really stood out as well. And I'll be interested to see how they try to incorporate that into their offense, because he's really good at that. And certainly Derrick Henry's not that guy. Haskins is not that guy. Really, Spears is that guy.
Well, I guess your evaluation, because obviously you evaluated Hassan Haskins coming out of Michigan. His opportunities were limited, other than the Cowboys game, because obviously the Titans rested a great deal of players in that Thursday night game. So tough to kind of get a handle on him in the pros. But how do you envision him based on the tape study that you did and understanding the kind of setting that he is now walking into?
I mean, Haskins you're talking about?
Haskins, yes.
I think Haskins is in some ways stylistically similar to Derek. I think he's a big back. He's a power back. He runs hard. Every once in a while he can break one. He doesn't have the speed that Derrick Henry has, but I think he can break one here and there. But again, you're dealing with a guy that's essentially a runner. Again, I'm just giving an opinion now, which is based on nothing, but I do believe that...
Other than the tape.
Right, but I do believe that Derrick Henry is likely not to be a Titan after this year. Again, that's purely an opinion. I understand if people disagree, that's okay. Maybe they view down the road Haskins and Spears being kind of a 1-2 because... keep in mind that throwing screens to a back does not make the back a good receiver. When I say a guy's a good receiver as a back, it's not because he can catch screens. Any back can catch screens. It's the ability to run routes. Tajae Spears, I don't know if we have any plays as a receiver, but he would line up offset in the backfield and run what we call H-seam, halfback seam. He'd run vertical routes.
Yeah.
That's a back that's a receiver. Backs that can detach from the formation. Backs that can run vertical routes or intermediate routes. Catching screens, any back in the league can catch screens.
Let's take a look at a 30-yard reception from Tajae Spears. It was against Houston in the second quarter of this game.
Now, this one is actually a design play where they're just throwing it out, a swing pass, but it's the run after catch. He's a very good space player. That's not obviously a seam play, but
right.
This is a design play. They're going to throw it out to him. Basically, he's just going to outflank the defense and get into space. And, he makes guys miss, as you saw right there. But he's very good in space. The question becomes deployment within the context of their offense. He's a third-round pick. You expect your third-round pick to at least contribute. We don't know how they see the backfield situation this year. Is it going to be the same style of offense? We don't know that. Obviously they have a new coordinator starting from scratch. So we don't know if it's going to be the exact same style of offense or if there's going to be some changes, either subtle or not so subtle.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get some questions from the audience because we'll go back to the Q&A here in just a second because I'm sure you guys have questions for Greg on this. But the offensive part of that with Tim Kelly as the OC being promoted from within, though, so I don't necessarily...
But Tim Kelly has a Bill O'Brien background. And Bill O'Brien was a very big believer in empty sets where there's no one in the backfield other than the quarterback. And if you want to play a lot of empty sets, and again, that's a relative term. They're not going to play empty sets 70% of the snaps. But if that's something that you want to be somewhat foundational in what you do, then Derrick Henry's not likely to be on the field. Because then you're going to have a back who's a split receiver that needs to be able to run routes. Because if he doesn't run routes, if he just takes 2 steps off the line of scrimmage, the defense will see that on tape, and they'll know that that guy's not really a viable receiving threat in that particular empty look. So you want your back in an empty set to be able to be a viable receiver who can run routes. Again, I'm not saying Tim Kelly will do that,
right.
But his background is Bill O'Brien, who is a big believer in empty sets.
I can only imagine the Twitter mentions if Derrick Henry's not on the field in certain situations in this.
Well, and we'll see. Again, these are things on May 20th we don't know the answer to, but Tajae Spears is not Derrick Henry. He's a totally different kind of back.
Which I think is important for people to keep in mind as you start to consider life beyond Derrick Henry. As I know that's not something a lot of people want to think about at this point, but it is, for all players, an eventuality.
Right.
So we've talked a lot about the receiving abilities of a running back. Let's talk about the receiver that they drafted in Colton Dowell. He's a 7th-round rookie out of UT Martin. He is somebody who, fits the archetype of what they like to have in their wide receivers.
He's big and he can run.
He's big and he can run. He reminds me a lot of Nick Westbrook-Akina, just to look at him. And I wonder I guess how much...
he's a more vertically explosive guy.
So let's start there. What separates what they have just added in Colton Dowell versus what they already have on the roster?
Well, let's also be realistic. The guy's a 7th-round pick.
Right.
Now, this is a team, again, being, based on film and being totally honest, this is not a great receiver room. So the 7th-round pick, he may have a shot to make the team. Obviously, OTAs, minicamp, training camp's really important for him because he's a 7th-round pick. And more often than not, believe it or not, scouts and coaches do get this right. There's always exceptions in every draft. We know that. But, he's a 7th-round pick for a reason. But they did play Tennessee this year, and they did play Boise State. Mm-hmm. And I watched those games carefully. And Colton Dowell ran by a corner for Tennessee. I believe it was Rucker. Who are the Vols fans here? They have a corner named Rucker, I believe. And he ran by Rucker on a vertical completion. And then he ran by E.J. Biggers for Boise State, who I believe was a 4-year starter at Boise State, and for a touchdown. So, you take note of those kinds of plays. So you're dealing with a guy that is big. He has very good athletic testing measurables. He can run he's a straight line vertical guy, and every team would like to have a vertical receiver because it does impact how defenses have to play in the secondary.
So let's take a look at that Boise State touchdown that Greg mentioned from the first quarter of that game. We've got a couple of Tennessee highlights as well.
And obviously you're not seeing the coaching tape here, but that's if we can see it again, you'll see he ran by an off-coverage corner. That's hard to do. So the corner is playing off coverage. You can see it here. He's 8-9 yards off the receiver, and he still is able to get on top of him. And that shows really good speed. So, you're dealing with a guy that, he's about 6'2". He's got really good size. You can almost see it just the size there. He's got some length to him. But, this was the play I mentioned against Boise State. So you look at this and you say that's a positive. And he did the same against Tennessee, against Rucker. He ran right by him. I don't know if we have that play or not.
We do. We have a 41-yard completion, I believe, is the Rucker
Yeah, that's
play.
the one. This is a tighter look, so you didn't see it, but I think Rucker was playing more press here, if I remember, because I saw the coaching tape, in my office. But
so you won't see Dowell at the bottom of the screen.
You can't see Dowell at the bottom, but it was press. And again, it's Tennessee, so I assume Rucker is a recruited athlete. And obviously Dowell is not a Division I recruited athlete, but he ran right by him and tracked the ball really well in there. That you could see how well he tracked the ball. So we'll see, because I think there's spots available in this receiver room. I think we know that. So we'll see. But for a 7th-round pick, you don't have a lot of margin for error.
We'll take some questions for Greg about the wide receivers and the running back here in just a second. But I guess, Greg, not asking for you to be critical of the coaching, obviously, but
I couldn't do that one way or the other because I'm not there.
Right. So I want to kind of put it in the context of what would you like to see them do more of in their passing game, understanding the collection of wide receivers that they have currently on the roster that includes Traylon Burks, Kyle Phillips, who we have not seen a lot of. They added Chris Moore from the Houston Texans, who Tim Kelly had a year with. Is there something that you would like to see them do more of in their passing game?
Well, I'll start with a couple of answers, a couple ways I'll answer that. Number one, I really like Kyle Phillips coming out of UCLA, and he had a lost year last year. I think he's purely a slot, but I think he's the kind of guy. When I watched his tape at UCLA, I kind of said to myself, this guy could roll out of bed and be a slot receiver in the NFL. So I'm very curious to see how he does. Obviously, he needs to stay healthy, but I think he's got a chance to be a quality slot receiver in this league. Then the second part of your question, or the main part of your question, is just what I spoke about a few minutes earlier. I think I'd like to see more formation variation. They've got a tight end in Chig who's very, very athletic. He can line up anywhere in your formation. Okay, he's not Travis Kelce, but he can line up anywhere in your formation. I'd like to see more of that. I think that it goes back to what I said earlier about the ability to attack with the pass game and try to create explosive plays in multiple ways. I think, look, we've seen him line up in the backfield. We've seen him line up in a traditional tight end position attached to the tackle. We've seen him line up split. Let's do more of that. Let's use him as a matchup weapon and dictate how defenses respond, and that helps your quarterback as well. I think Burks can line up anywhere. I don't know how Tim Kelly feels about motion, but a lot of good offenses in this league use heavy motion. Now, again, that's a philosophy. Right. There's no right or wrong. The 49ers use a ton of motion. The Dolphins use a ton of motion. The Chiefs use a ton of motion. Now, again, that's a function. Is your quarterback comfortable with it? Are you comfortable with it as a coach? But motion can often do a lot of things for you as well. So these are things just as a football purist and someone who watches a ton of tape of every team in the league, these are things that I think would enhance the opportunities in the pass game to create big plays.
Would you like to see some more big plays in the Titans offense? One would imagine. So let's go around the room. Do you guys have questions for Greg about the wide receiver and running back situation? We got a couple.
We got a few. We got a few
in the back here, Rich, if you would be so kind. Just tell us your name and let us know your question.
What's up? My name's John, and my question is this. So with Tajae, he's not an inside tackles kind of running back. He's more of an outside the kind of running back. Do you think that would make it easier for an opposing defense to kind of figure out and kind of pre-scout it when he's on the field versus when Haskins is on the field or Henry's on the field? Do you think it makes it easier for them?
Well, you agree with that assessment?
John, I'm not sure I agree with that based on film study. I mean, he's not a power runner in the strict sense, but he does break tackles. He has tremendous contact balance, and he finishes runs. Now, are you going to give him the ball 25 times a game off tackle? No, you're not. You wouldn't do that anyway. He's not built like that to do that. But he can run inside, and he ran inside a lot in college for whatever that's worth. So, no, I don't think there's predictability if Tajae Spears is on the field. I think he can run your same inside zone, mid-zone runs, your same gap scheme runs, which normally hit relatively inside. So I don't think it's one of those things where he's not a scat back. He's not like that. You know, he's more than that. He's got some there's a difference when you watch backs. There's a difference between power and physicality. You wouldn't call him powerful, but he's physical. He's competitively tough, so he can run inside.
Who else we got for questions on the running backs and wide receivers? We got one at the same table, Rich, or another one up front here.
So, Greg, you're a tape guy. Based on the tape, a lot of us in this room expected the Titans to take at least one, if not multiple, wideouts in the draft. We waited to the 7th round.
Wishful thinking.
But having said that, with taking, as you said, a running back who runs route trees, runs screens, and a pass-catching tight end, should that make us feel better about not taking a wide receiver to the 7th, that we took a pass-catching tight end and a running back that can run routes? Should we feel better because of that?
Greg, you and I talked about the way that the wide receiver worked out in the draft, in particular, with the way that teams have these guys on their boards.
Yeah, and that's what we never know. That's the thing. You know, it's always easy to say they should have taken a wide receiver, and clearly when you look at their wide receiver room now, yes, that seems to make sense. But, again, because I'm not one who just automatically rips coaches or scouts or, play, I don't do that.
I can do that for you, bud. I got you.
Yeah, you got that?
I got you.
Okay. So let's think of it now with what they did do, okay? Because obviously crying over spilled milk here doesn't solve anything. They did not draft a wide receiver until the 7th round, and we have no idea if he even makes the team, no matter what his traits may or may not be.
Right.
So think of it this way. They drafted Josh Wiley from Cincinnati in the 4th round, I believe. Was it?
5th.
5th?
No 4th-round pick this year.
Okay.
Shout out Julio Jones.
So Wiley is a big kid who comes out of Cincinnati. He's from Cincinnati. He was a high-level recruit who could have played in the SEC and chose to stay home in Cincinnati. Now, they could be thinking that they're going to line up in 12 personnel, meaning 1 back, 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, and be very formation diverse out of that. Keep in mind, the team last year, and this will surprise you, I imagine it would, the team last year that had the highest percentage of playing with multiple tight ends in the NFL was the Kansas City Chiefs. So you can play with multiple tight ends if you can be formation diverse. And again, lining them up in different places. You can be in empty sets with them. You can do a lot of things, assuming Wiley has, and again, he's a 5th-round pick. So again, we don't know what he is till we go through the OTAs. But he's big, he's long. Because he's long, he does have 3-level ability. He can be a seam stretcher. He can run vertical routes to some degree. So we'll see. Does that ease the fact that they don't have, they have Ideally, Burks, and beyond that, we don't know much more about the receivers. Does that ease that? Maybe, maybe not. Only time will tell. But maybe they see 12 personnel, as I said, 2 tight ends, as a way to be more formation diverse and multiple with how they line up.
Let's take one more question, then we'll take another intermission before we get to the final segment. We got one more up front here in the couch section. It looks very comfortable over there.
I got it. Okay. Hey, thank you so much, Greg. Scott Shaw. After the draft, I think it was Paul Kuharski asked Vrabel a pointed question about not taking any wide receivers, and Vrabel was very pointed in replying that, well, we can select wide receivers up until training camp. Do you see any opportunities, especially after June 1st, for some veterans?
Mike's line was, it's good enough for Monday. It's good. The wide receiver group was good enough for the Monday after the draft. Basically, that they can continue free agency after the draft. There will be players who will hit the waiver wire.
Which there will be.
Right.
We don't know who they'll be.
Sure. And that's kind of, I guess, what fans are looking for. Is there anything else out there, theoretically, that the Titans could add to this wide receiver group that might make them feel a little better about their circumstance?
And I certainly couldn't answer based on a specific wide receiver.
Sure.
But there's always wide receivers that are out there. The question is, are they any good, and how do they fit what you want to do?
Are they better than what you have?
Are they better than what you have? There will be wide receivers out there. On Thursday when I was with the guys on 3HL, I did mention that, a guy that has intrigued me from the time I watched him in college, and I think this is a super important offseason for him because this kid is big, can run, and has trace, is Reising McMath. I mean, he was a big-time recruit at LSU. He actually came out of Edna Carr High School in Algiers in New Orleans, which is one of the worst areas and the worst high schools in the country. And I actually mentioned there's a great book on that called Across the River by Kent Babb. It's an unbelievable book. It's about that high school. But Reising McMath was a big-time recruit at LSU. He's 6'3", he's 215, 220. He can run. It didn't work at LSU. I mean, he didn't catch a lot of balls. I watched, I think, every one of his snaps at LSU the year he came out because of his size and his speed. And he's just he's sort of a pet project of mine. Like, I'm waiting for this guy to be good because there's something there.
So are they.
Yeah, I know. And maybe he'll never be. We don't know the answer to that.
Right.
But I think this is an off season with this wide receiver room, a chance for this guy to really, and I hate to use this phrase, but for right now I can't think of a better one, a chance for this guy to step up, whatever that means.
Look at you with the coaching cliches.
Yeah. But he makes a play here and there these last couple of years, and you go, wow, I think there's something there. But
He's got 4 career catches.
I know.
It's hard.
Well, he made 4 plays. That's what I said. He makes a play here and there. Yeah.